There's no sugarcoating it when the news broke that Christian Wilkins was no longer part of the Las Vegas Raiders. It hit hard. Not just because of the name, not just because of the expectations, but because this was a guy expected to anchor the defensive interior and bring a new level of physicality to the line. His exit, however it played out behind the scenes, leaves a hole, a big one. But now the focus shifts. What do the Raiders do next? Who steps up? And more importantly, who do they go after through trades, free agency, or maybe even within the locker room? Let's start with what's already in-house, because before looking outside the building, you always look at what you've got. Pete Carroll and John Spytek aren't just thinking about who they can bring in. They're thinking about who can rise from within. There's a lot of pressure, no doubt, but there's also opportunity. And that might be what fuels this next chapter of the Raiders' line. Right now, the roster stands at 90 players. They're allowed to carry 91 thanks to the International Pathway program, and that could be significant because it gives them just that little bit of breathing room to make a move without having to cut anyone immediately. Now, I'll be real with you, we still don't have the full picture when it comes to how much cap space the Raiders have available, especially with the Wilkins situation still hovering around. There's a grievance reportedly being filed, and that could impact how much money they're willing or even able to commit in the short term. But let's zone in on the guys already wearing the silver and black. This is where it gets interesting. One name to keep on your radar is Janarius Lew. He's a young player, kind of flew under the radar last season, but he's shown flashes when called upon. Big frame, high motor, and someone who was thrown into the fire when Wilkins went down and handled it better than people expected. Is he ready to be a full-time starter? Maybe not yet. But in a rotational role or even in a matchup-based package, he could absolutely contribute and take a step forward if given the snaps. Then there's Tonka Hemingway. A rookie, yes, and still learning the ropes, but there's some upside there. He's got the raw tools. He's a tweener somewhere between a defensive tackle and an edge guy. And when you're trying to replace someone like Wilkins, sometimes it's not just about finding one guy. It's about piecing it together with different looks, different skill sets. J.J. Pegas is another rookie in that mold. And while both of them probably aren't ready to carry the weight on their own, if they can hold their own situationally, that helps ease the load. Now here's a name you're going to hear a lot more: Adam Butler. Signed to a 3-year, $16.5 million deal, he's the guy being looked at as the #1 defensive tackle right now. Butler's a guy I've always seen more as a DT to a support player who shines when paired with a dominant interior presence. But now that role shifts. With Wilkins gone, Butler becomes the top dog on the line, and the expectations are going to ramp up. He's going to have to lead not just by example, but in terms of production. No more hiding behind a star. This is his moment. And then there's Leki Fotu. This offseason, he's been the guy most consistently plugged in as Wilkins' direct replacement. Signed after the draft, Fotu brings size, legit size. We're talking one of the biggest defensive tackles on the roster, outside maybe of Tank Booker and Lokahi Toaloa. While Lokahi has been seeing some reps at offensive guard, Fotu's role is clear: be the space eater. Take on double teams, free up Crosby, free up Malcolm Kuntz. And if he can do that, even if the stat sheet doesn't show it, it could be a huge boost for the rest of the front. But the guy who really needs to make a leap, like a real noticeable leap, is Tyree Wilson, the 7th overall pick in the 2023 draft. The player many fans still have high hopes for despite a rookie season that didn't exactly set the league on fire. Word is he's been putting in serious work, trying to bulk up by 10 to 15 pounds, getting reps both at defensive end and sliding inside. And if you've seen any clips from training camp so far, you know he looks good. But looking good in shells and actually dominating in live reps are two different things. The Raiders need Wilson to be that hybrid wrecking ball who can move inside on passing downs and cause disruption. And if he does take that next step, if he finds that groove, that could soften the Wilkins blow more than any trade or signing could. Now I know the question that's probably bouncing around in your head right now is, how confident should we be in this group? As it is, if you're asking me, I'm going with a 7 out of 10 on the full defensive line. Not perfect, but definitely not panic mode either. Max Crosby is still that dude. He's one of the elite pass rushers in the NFL, and having a guy like him leading the line is a luxury most teams don't have. Adam Butler, I believe he can hold down the interior, even if I'd prefer to have someone next to him with more consistent burst. And as for the depth, guys like Fotu, Zach Carter, and Lew give the team enough bodies to stay competitive even if they don't have that one superstar right now. If we narrow it down to just the defensive tackle room, I'll be honest, it drops to about a 6. There's potential, sure, but you can't replace someone like Wilkins without a dip in performance. You can only hope to minimize the gap. Players like Malcolm Kuntz and Tyree Wilson, their health and availability are going to be everything. These are the guys who can swing the needle. If they're on the field consistently and productive, this defense can hang with just about anyone. If not, well, things get dicey in a hurry. So let's say internal options don't fully cover the need. Then what? Then we start looking at trades. Now I know what you're thinking, big names. Guys like Trey Hendrickson, maybe even Micah Parsons if you're dreaming real big. But let's be real for a second. These aren't the kind of moves you make unless you're ready to give up serious capital. And I just don't see the Raiders in a position to mortgage that kind of future right now. Instead, the trade targets that make sense are the ones who bring value, experience, and familiarity without breaking the bank. First name I'm calling about, John Jenkins from the Ravens. He's got ties to Rob Leonard, ties to Patrick Graham, played for the Raiders recently. This is a guy who knows the system and fits the culture. And if Vegas were to bring him back, it'd only cost them about $1.3 million. That's nothing in today's NFL. And get this, I actually spoke with someone close to Jenkins and he was under the impression that he might be rejoining the Raiders. Loves the idea. Still locked in with Baltimore, still focused, but he'd jump at the chance if the call came. Another interesting name is Andrew Billings, currently with the Bears, formerly with the Raiders. He's bounced around, been with Miami, played with Adam Butler, Jenkins, Rob Leonard. You get the picture. The connections are there, and Chicago just added Grady Jarrett, so there might be a little wiggle room to make a deal. Only issue, health. He hasn't always been able to stay on the field, but when he is, he can produce. Solid run stuffer. A guy you can rotate in and feel comfortable with. There's also Matt Ioannidis from Carolina. Not a superstar, but reliable. 30 years old, not too expensive. The Panthers just reloaded their defensive front, and it feels like he could be the odd man out. Played over 700 snaps last year. Not flashy, but productive in the right system. And Carolina's defense was on the field a ton, so you have to factor that in when looking at his grade. Then you've got David Onyemata from Atlanta. ESPN floated his name earlier this offseason as a potential cut or trade candidate. He's older, yes, 32, but still solid. If the Falcons move on from him, it clears over $10 million in cap space. So if you're the Raiders and you're willing to absorb that salary or restructure, you might be able to snag him. He's still got juice left. Not elite, but a guy who could step in and start from day one. Now I know this next one is unlikely, but let's throw it out there anyway. John Franklin Mears from the Broncos. Yeah, interdivision trades are rare, especially when you're talking about a player who's still under contract and wants a new deal. But stranger things have happened in this league. The Raiders' assistant GM Brian Stark has ties to Denver. Frank Lindmeers didn't show up to OTA letters earlier this year, though he's since reported to training camp. That situation might have cooled down, but if tensions rise again, maybe there's an opening. So free agency, this is where things get a little tricky, but also where opportunity knocks loudest. The Raiders have some clear needs, no question, but they also have to balance the books carefully. After the Wilkins situation, money isn't exactly overflowing, and that forces smart surgical moves rather than flashy splurges. But sometimes the best signings are the ones nobody's watching closely at first. It's all about fit, scheme, and how the player's personality jives with the locker room culture. There's a decent pool of defensive tackles and interior linemen who might be on the market or could be moved before the season kicks off. Names like Gerald McCoy still bounce around conversations. Even if his best days are behind him, he's a veteran, a known locker room presence, someone who can mentor young players like Lou or Fotu while giving solid depth. Maybe not a long-term answer, but he could buy the Raiders time to develop their guys without losing too much on the field. Others to watch are players like Jonathan Hankins. He's been in the league a long time, played for several teams, and brings a gritty, hard-nosed style. He's the kind of guy coaches love because he'll show up and do the dirty work in the trenches. If the Raiders can sign a guy like Hankins on a short deal, that veteran toughness could stabilize a unit still finding its identity. There's also Kyle Pico. He's bounced between active rosters and practice squads, but is known as a reliable run stuffer. Nothing flashy, but if you're looking for a plug-and-play guy who can fill rotational snaps and maintain decent level of play, Pico fits that mold. For the Raiders, who need bodies that can contribute without demanding the world in salary, he could be a very practical addition. If the Raiders want to gamble a little, they might look at borderline players recovering from injury or coming off down years who could be motivated for a fresh start. These kinds of signings are always hit or miss, but when they hit, they pay off big. Someone like Akeem Spence fits this category. He's been a journeyman with flashes of solid play but inconsistency, and injuries have kept him on the fringes. The Raiders might bring him in on a cheap deal with incentives, and if he's healthy and motivated, he could surprise people. The other interesting wrinkle in free agency is the International Pathway Program player. This year, the Raiders have a spot to fill with an international player. And while these guys are often developmental prospects, sometimes there's hidden gem potential. Maybe there's a young lineman from Europe or Australia who can add some depth. It's a long shot, but for a low investment, it's worth seeing who's on the radar. Now, as free agency heats up, you start to realize that the Raiders are likely going to have to mix internal development, some savvy low-risk signings, and maybe a trade or two to cover the gap left by Wilkins. It's not an enviable position, but it's also not a disaster. There's talent here. The question is whether the coaching staff can get everyone playing at their ceiling. From a scheme perspective, the Raiders might lean into more versatility up front. Instead of trying to find one guy to replace Wilkins' unique skill set, they could use packages with multiple fronts. Maybe deploy Fotu and Butler as the base tackles with Wilson sliding inside in passing situations, and bring in Lou or Carter to spell snaps, rotate off and keep players fresh, and try to confuse offenses with different looks. One subtle thing to watch is how this affects the linebackers and secondary. If the defensive line can't generate pressure or stop the run effectively, linebackers have to compensate, which changes their responsibilities and can expose them to more wear and tear. Likewise, the secondary might have to hold coverage longer if pass rush isn't consistent, so the ripple effect here is big. And of course, the Raiders are blessed or maybe cursed with Max Crosby. He's their alpha dog. If Crosby continues his elite pass rush production, that helps hide a lot of imperfections inside. Opponents have to respect him enough to chip blockers or roll the pocket away from him, which opens up opportunities for others. But if Crosby has a down year or gets hurt, the pressure falls squarely on the rest of the line. And that's where the Raiders could really struggle. Speaking of injuries, health is always a wild card. Wilkins' departure isn't just a cap or depth problem, it's also a reminder of how fragile NFL rosters can be. The Raiders have to stay disciplined in managing workloads and preparing their backups. Players like Fotu and Lou might see increased snaps, and their conditioning and mental readiness will be under a microscope. The Raiders' defensive coordinator also plays a huge role here. His ability to scheme around personnel losses will be tested. We've seen defensive coordinators in the past mask roster weaknesses by clever blitzes, disguised coverages, and changing alignments pre-snap. Expect to see more creative looks to maximize the strengths of guys like Crosby, Wilson, and Butler, while minimizing exposure for less experienced players. One dark horse to watch is the emergence of young guys on the practice squad or in training camp battles. Every team has players hidden on the edges, guys who fly under the radar but could surprise if given a chance. Maybe there's a latter-round rookie or undrafted free agent who turns heads and earns snaps. It wouldn't be the first time a team lost a big name and found a diamond in the rough. At the end of the day, the Raiders' defensive line situation post-Wilkins is a test of adaptability and depth. It's about balancing youth and experience, mixing veterans with upside players, and trusting the coaching staff to get the best out of what they have. The next few weeks will be crucial as camp progresses, and decisions are made on who sticks, who gets moved, and who gets called up from the practice squad. The fans will be watching closely. Some might panic, worried about how the defense will hold up without Wilkins anchoring the middle. Others will remain optimistic, betting on the coaching staff and the roster's overall talent to weather the storm. Realistically, the Raiders aren't poised for a total collapse, but they aren't on cruise control either. It's a dynamic, high-pressure situation. The moves made now could define this season and even influence the team's direction for years. If the Raiders manage to plug the gap effectively, they could surprise some people and maintain a stout defensive front. If not, the cracks could widen and opponents will take advantage. Either way, this offseason saga is far from over. We're only just seeing the first moves. The whispers of trades, the quiet negotiations for free agents, the development of young players, all will unfold over the coming weeks. It's a roller coaster for Raiders fans, anxious, exciting, and full of what-ifs as training camp heats up. Keep your eyes on the defensive line group. Watch how they gel together, who emerges as a leader besides Crosby, and how the coaches adjust their game plans to get the most out of their personnel. That's where the Raiders' identity on defense will be forged this year, and the way they respond to Wilkins' absence will say a lot about this team's resilience. and ambition. In the end, football is about next man up. The Raiders know that better than most. Now it's time to see who that next man is. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give this video a like. Your support helps us keep bringing you the latest updates on our Las Vegas Raiders. And don't be shy, drop your thoughts on the news in the comments. Below, the dessert winds are carrying whispers of a blockbuster shakeup in the NFL. And if the latest chatter is to be believed, it might just be one of the most earth-shaking signings of the offseason. Word around the league suggests that the Las Vegas Raiders may have reached a deal with none other than Derrick Henry, the bruising All-Pro running back whose name is synonymous with power and dominance, though no official confirmation has emerged. The buzz among insiders and fans alike is deafening, and Raider Nation is already celebrating, as if the king himself has landed on the Strip. The rumor started picking up steam earlier this week, when multiple sources reported serious discussions between Henry's camp and the Raiders' front office. Social media went into a frenzy when a private jet believed to be linked to the Henry entourage was spotted landing at McCarran Airport. Then came the viral photo, a blurry but unmistakable figure resembling Henry donning Raiders gear at what looked suspiciously like the team facility. Coincidence? Fans don't think so. Derrick Henry, 30, is still seen as one of the most punishing backs in the game. And after his storied run in Tennessee, speculation has long surrounded where the next chapter of his career would unfold. The Raiders, rebuilding under a new regime and looking to add firepower, would make a tantalizing fit. With their recent moves to bolster the offensive line and a quarterback situation still in flux, adding a proven workhorse like Henry could signal a shift toward a run-first defense with smash-mouth attitude. Raiders fans haven't exactly been subtle in their reaction. "This is what we've been waiting for, finally some muscle in our backfield," shouted one fan. Outside Allegiant Stadium, online forums are ablaze with mock-ups of Henry in silver and black, while Vegas sportsbooks have reportedly seen a sudden spike in Raiders futures bets. Of course, until pen hits paper, it remains just a rumor. But if there's any truth to the noise, Las Vegas might be about to roll the dice on a move that could shake up the entire AFC West. Stay tuned. That's it for this update. If you enjoyed the video and want to stay updated with exclusive news about our Las Vegas Raiders, be sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that like button. We can't wait to hear your thoughts in the comments. See you in the next video.